Hello to you all. I'm Paul Drew. Before we get properly underway, I'd like to give you a little bit of background to this talk. My work in the department is largely concerned with and focuses on language use, the way we use language in our ordinary communication with one another. By ordinary communication, I mean both to include our ordinary social interaction with family and friends, but also how we use language in workplace and other settings. For example, in the classroom, between teachers and students, the way we use language in offices between colleagues or in shops. I've done work on interviewing benefits claimants in job centres, the interviews between advisors and benefits claimants, emergency calls that are made to the police, for instance, on 999. Much of my work now is really on medical interaction of various kinds, doctor-patient, doctors and doctors interacting with one another. So in all these places, we're using language in communication. And of course, immediately there's a comparative aspect, which is relevant probably to your syllabus in A-level, which is the difference, how language in the workplace differs from language in ordinary social interaction, as with family and friends. What is distinctive about the language that we use in the workplace? And here I want to focus on a particular kind of workplace, which is criminal courts. That I'm going to be looking really at what is distinctive about certain aspects of language used in criminal court trials. It would be useful, but absolutely not essential, to have looked at the lead-in task before listening to the rest of this presentation. I really don't mean that you should stop listening now and turn to that, but if you have the chance, do look at that lead-in task, which is a kind of an exercise in seeing. There are two brief excerpts. You'll find the transcription symbols at the end of the lead-in task, two brief extracts of very different kinds of interactions. And the issue is really, what are those settings, those interactions, and what are the differences between them? So there's immediately it's kind of the matter of language use and a comparative aspect to this work. There are some key themes in what I want to talk about. First of all, we view language as action. Language is used to perform social actions. I'll come and say a bit more about this in a moment, but this is a very different perspective on language than is quite common in, for example, semantics or certain aspects of linguistics. I'll give you some further background on that. So that's one theme. Language is action. I give you a simple example. When you're speaking to someone, you might make a request, ask them if they could pass you something. That's a request. It's not descriptive. It's done for an action. The second kind of key theme is the differences between, and I've already mentioned this briefly, but the differences between ordinary social interaction, informal interaction, and interaction in whatever setting we're studying, in this case, in courts. There's some very obvious differences, and I want to say something more about those differences. The background to this is a paper that you have available, a paper of mine which is coming out later this year, written by a colleague in Brazil who has a legal training, and that you probably don't want to be given some sort of added reading but you will find this quite accessible. It's not written in a very technical way. It's written to be accessible to people in the field. Although it's in a handbook for forensic linguistics, I think you'd find it really quite accessible, and that will cover really most of the themes that I'm going to talk about. The final kind of key theme of these three themes is that I'm focusing on questioning and looking at, in a way, the strategic use of questioning. You know, there's a standard definition of questions in linguistics, which is that questions are about getting information. They're information seeking. So you ask, you know, what time does the bus leave? And that is seeking information, and someone says it leaves at 3:10, and you say, thank you. Now, actually, most questioning is not, as it were, neutral or innocent in that way. It is not about just getting information. It's about doing something. So, for example, even the question, what time does the bus leave? And the person looks at their watch, the recipient looks at their watch, and they realize, oh, it leaves in a few minutes. Yeah, you'd better get your skates on. So the question, what time does the bus leave, is really reminding them, chivying them up to you know, get ready for going out. But I'm looking at much more intricate and matters of the strategic use of questioning. So that is my third really key theme. Now, going back to the first, speech as action, there's here an extension task which you have, which concerns a murder trial from the early 1950s, I think it was 52 or so, in which the evidence hung, and I won't go into detail because you will have access to the information about this on the extension task, but it concerned the utterance, "Let him have it, Chris." This was said by one. There were two criminals. One had a gun, was pointing it at the police officer, and the other one, who was unarmed, Bentley, said to his friend Craig, "Let him have it, Chris." And the evidence in court hung on what was Bentley intending to do with this, by "let him have it." It wasn't exactly what did he mean, but was this an instruction to Craig to hand over the gun to the police officer, let him have it? Or was it instructing, there's an idiomatic, of course, meaning of let him have it, which is shoot him, let him have it. And a lot of the evidence in court hung on what did he intend to do. It was clearly an instruction. And one thing that's common to both interpretations or understandings is it's an imperative mood. You can see it's an imperative to the other to do something, but quite what to do was the whole crux of the trial. So if it would be useful just to look at that. Do it afterwards now. Don't stop now. Now, in conversation, then, this is just thinking about ordinary social conversation, we use language to perform social actions. We do ask questions. We ask someone for example, their opinion on something or for information about something, but we do it to report good news and bad. I've got something terrible to tell you, or you'll never guess what happened today, or something like this. We can commonly complain, or compliment someone else, to agree or disagree, to express surprise, disbelief, disgust, this food, etc. And particularly, and I've worked a lot with Coben Kendrick, and I've taken this list from his slide from last year's edition of this event, to request assistance. We're looking at how do people ask for assistance or offer assistance to one another. So what I'm trying to convey is that we use language in order to do things in the world. You can think of this as a kind of speech act approach. I've given you a information sheet which gives you the sort of the linguistic and philosophical background to treating language as action and thinking of speech acts, a request, an invitation, a complaint. These are kinds of speech, a promise. These are all speech acts. And I think, again, the information sheet, although I've said it's about the philosophy of language, this is, again, very accessible. These are not obscure matters, really. And we're comparing here the mode of talk in ordinary social interaction with the mode of talk that's typical of courtroom examination. And one key difference between them is that in ordinary conversation, turn-taking, the matter of who speaks when and how and for how long and all that sort of thing, is all locally organized. It's all contingent. It depends on, you know, what I say and what you say and what she says and whether she disagrees with me or whether she agrees with me. So that the turn-taking is all a matter of the here and now, the being locally organized. But this is not the case in courtroom examination. The matter of who speaks is pre-assigned, pre-allocated. And pre-allocated is almost the only technical term that I'll use. What I mean by that is it's decided beforehand that there's an order to examination, which is first of all, let's take the defendant. The defendant is first of all examined by one lawyer, and then, so the lawyer asks the question and the defendant answers, and then their own lawyer, that's to say the defense lawyer, will take over and ask questions. And again, the defendant asks. So who asks, who takes a turn is pre-allocated: lawyer, defendant, or witness. Moreover, the type of turns that they take is also pre-allocated. That is, everything that a lawyer asks, the attorney, the barrister, whoever, whatever description you use, should be hearable as a question. They don't do anything other than ask questions. And the defendant or the witness should always answer. So now we've got types of terms are pre-allocated, and to whom each type is allocated is also pre-allocated. And that is the key difference between ordinary social interaction, social informal interaction, and language in the court. Notice, and this is generalizable, this is also the case in things like news interviews, interviews with public figures. On the radio, you hear interviews, and you know the interviewer gets to ask the questions, and the interviewee should answer. And if they don't answer, and this does happen in court, then that is noticeably absent. They should have answered. Are they evading, being evasive in some fashion? In courts, we have a restricted turn-taking system. It's restricted to questions and answers, that lawyers ask the questions, witnesses answer, pre-allocation of turns. This gives, and this is very important right away, this gives the questioner a considerable power, because in effect, they direct the agenda. The one who asks the questions directs the agenda. Of course, witnesses and defendants find this very difficult, just as people in news interviews, in the ordinary news interviews on media, find that difficult, because the agenda is being set by the one asking the questions. And you see, you know, for example, politicians working to try to find a way of regaining control over the agenda. And that's another kind of area, and one well worth exploring. But for the moment, think of the power of the questioner as setting the agenda, but there's also something else, which is that they have, in a sense, the third turn. The lawyer asks a question, the barrister asks a question, then the witness answers, or the defendant answers. Now, there's an opportunity to assess, in effect, the answer that the defendant or witness gave. And by assessing it, what we see is that the lawyer can, in various ways, imply whether they believe the witness's answer, whether they believe that the answer was being truthful there. So they can indicate the extent to which they think that answer was credible or adequate or something of that kind.